Kia ora everyone, and welcome to this Creative Waikato live stream panel discussion on IP and the arts. My name is Jeremy Mayall. I'm the CEO of Creative Waikato, and I am joined here by a panel of artists and lawyers and specialists to talk about this fascinating and important topic. So who I have here with me today is working around the screen, Kate Wilson, Zoe Hall, DJ Spell, and Shane Hanson. We were going to be joined also by Taniko Nordstrom, but unfortunately she is unwell today and so won't be able to be part of the discussions. So, about the talk, artists and other creative entrepreneurs are involved in the world of intellectual property, whether they're aware of it or not. Intellectual property deals with the things that are created and gives those things and those people certain rights and protections under the law. These include the rights for artistic, musical, film and literary works, the creation of symbols, designs and phrases, inventions and processes. There is a sense of confusion around IP in the arts, and we know that it would be useful for all involved if the rules regarding intellectual property were clear and easy to understand, and hence this discussion. Looking at the intangible elements such as the thought processes and skill that went into design, the unique combination and arrangement of shapes or sounds or textures or textiles and so on, how do all of these things work, how can they be qualified and protected, and what can be done with regards to fair use, misuse, and infringement when the case may arise. So we're going to be talking with these fine people who have joined me here this evening about their experience, their work, their dealings with IP in the context of arts, the things that go right, the things that go wrong, and the things that everyone needs to be thinking about in consideration of different art forms and the way that we work. Now, if you're watching online, please do feel free to put any questions or comments that you may have in the comments feature of the Facebook Live, and we'll deal with them when we get a chance to. But to start with, we're just going to talk around what is going on and let all of these people introduce themselves. So we're going to start with Kate. So Kate, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and your involvement in terms of IP in the arts.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm a bit of an outlier in terms of this group. My original background was the sciences, so physics and chemistry. And then I got into IP law, and I suspect that's the main reason I came into here rather than my role as an artist. So I built up an IP law firm, James and Wells. But where I was thinking about this whole exercise tonight was I thought, well, it's more relevant, not the fact that I was involved with the law firm, but some of the things that I've done in terms of creating my own IP and the thoughts behind it. So, for example, I'm an author of a number of books, including not only law books, but also a cookbook, which part of my foodie obsession, which led to me leaving my law firm to actually own a cafe, a country cafe. So that was an interesting diversion. I'm also an artist, a conceptual artist. There's an exhibition actually coming up next week, which I've been asked to contribute to. But when I was looking at what I'd done, I actually realised, looking at my bits and pieces of art, it wasn't just about me being worried about people copying me. I actually sort of thought, oh, I've got some elements in my art, if somebody wanted to take an issue with, perhaps they could. And so I think us as artists need to think about both sides, not only how we stop people from taking our elements, but also making certain there's no arguments about the elements that we use.
And Kate, you've when you're talking, if you want me to throw up any of those slides that you've sent through as well, let me know and we can put them up on the screen.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, so I've sent through, Jeremy, a few slides, 3 of the paintings that has some suspicious elements in it, and a few other bits and pieces that explain a few bits and pieces, but we'll see how we go.
Cool. Awesome, thank you. So next on the panel we have DJ Spell. So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Spell, and most people know me as a DJ, but I have a background in visual arts and film. I started off as a graffiti writer, so I come from that world. And then moved into the music world, and that's it. That's me.
Because you're also a beat maker as well, so you're producing tracks as well as DJing.
Yeah. Yes. Cool. So I had to Google what IP was. It's a foreign language to me. So yeah, but pretty much I've made a career out of taking other people's IP and stealing it and repackaging it and selling it.
Maybe we should talk later.
Yeah. But that's the world that I come from. Yeah, our art is literally taking other people's art and flipping it, as we like to say. Yeah,
definitely. And I think there's some really interesting things to kind of unpack in that as we go through the discussion. But I also enjoyed your Instagram stories maybe a month ago, where you were sort of uncovering the journey of a cake and the selling of a recipe and what that means in terms of IP and unpacking who made which beats.
Yeah.
So you're a bit of an IP detective yourself as well, it seems.
I guess so, yeah, without even knowing that's what I was doing. Yeah, I was, yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's me, guys.
Cool.
Nice to be here, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. And Zoe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Tēnā koutou. Thanks for having me. I'm Zoe Hall. I'm an artist. I have been painting murals on the streets since 2008, and over that time, because it's public art, it gets photographed a lot, which is awesome. But quite a number of times, my artwork has been photographed and then put in a calendar or postcards or advertising campaigns for large companies, and it's all been done without my permission. It's been done without any contact at all to me. But the funny thing is, up until December last year, myself and a lot of other muralists and street artists and graffiti artists did not know that our public artworks were copyrighted. We thought because they were in the public that they were, the public could do whatever they wanted with them. We didn't think there was anything we could fight against this injustice. But thank goodness for social media sometimes. I had a bit of a rant in December when my mural was on the cover of my David Bowie mural was on the cover of a calendar that had been made overseas and distributed throughout New Zealand through Wickles. And I was like, I'm just sick of this. Like, what? This is just rude. It's just rude. So, had a bit of a rant, and then it just opened up the floodgates, and all these people like, this is happening to me too. There's nothing we didn't think there was anything we could do. And then a couple of people reached out to me, and they're like, actually, there is something you can do. This is completely illegal. You do own the copyright, or at least the moral rights to your artwork, because it is an original piece. And the deeper I delved into it, I realized, oh my gosh, like, this is not okay. And it's happening to people all the time, not just with street art, but also like cultural appropriation and, just ripping off artists' culture for money, for commercial gain. And it just lit a little fire there, and me and my friend, new friend who I met through this whole process, Tom Huthwaite, he's an IP lawyer and a huge arts like loves the arts in Wellington, and he and me got together and we started a website called Bad Exposure, and he wrote all the content for it, and it's just like a massive learning resource for artists, but also people who are interested in street art, public art, art in general, and wanting to, distribute it or make money off it or promote it or whatever. It's just a massive resource on how they can, learn what's good, what's not, what's right, what's wrong, and also give artists the knowledge and power to fight it if it happens to them. So that's my rant.
Good rant. I've just been looking up all the publicity around what you've been doing. It's brilliant stuff.
Thank you. We were just so passionate about it, and it would just all happen at the right time. I think we followed the domino effect, and it all fell into place quite well. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, there's lots in there to unpack as we go on. Finally, our last panelist here is Shane Hanson. So, Shane.
Koutou, ko tāna i te waka, ko taupiri, ko rongia ngā maunga tūpuna, ko Waipā te awa, ko Waikato te iwi, ko nā te mahanga haura te apu, ko te papa o rautu te marae, ko tūrikaka, tōku kainga ni nei, ko Shane Hanson, tōku ingoa. Hey, thanks so much for having me. This is my first Zoom in my whole entire life, so it's a little bit strange. I find it funny sitting and seeing everyone, but I'm getting comfortable with it. My history is kind of one of self-discovery, really. I've always played around with art forms since a kid, and I started my creative journey as a fashion designer. I actually lived in Hamilton for a couple of years working for Town and Country Surf. That was my first taste in as working for a company designing clothing. And so I spent about 15 years doing that, but during that whole time, I was always just wanted this need to become my own entity and design and create, be an artist, really. And so after doing that, I started a marketing and design business. Never used the computer before. I had to teach myself a bit about that kind of stuff. And then after doing that for about 5 years, I kind of had a personal breakdown in my life. I went through a serious bout of depression, and I needed to stop what I was doing and sort of redress where I was at. So that kind of started me thinking a bit more about this, becoming an artist, and I started creating these personal pieces. And from that, I was just starting to feel really good. My life was picking up. I was feeling a lot better about who I was and what I was meant to be. And so at that point, which is a decade ago now, I decided this is what I'm going to do. And so I suppose you'd call me a visual artist. I'm known for my paint works and screen prints and print works. But I think for me, being creative is just finding something that drives me, that gets me up in the morning, that makes me passionate. So it could be sculpture, furniture design. I still do a little bit of fashion now and then, and just anything really that gets those creative juices flowing and makes me feel good. My experience with IP has been many different takes over the years. But probably the most recent one, and the one that people know me for, was one that I actually took on against Skate Rentals, which was actually, that's when I came across James and Wells, because they were defending the other guys. And so that was kind of my first sort of real delving into what IP means and how, to try and protect that. It took a year of fighting to get to a point where I was happy and could come up. We came up with a settlement, and I was able to kind of let that go. But it took a year, and I learned a lot from that. I actually really like the comment that Kate made earlier on about how do we sit as creatives because I'm influenced by a lot of things. You know, all my work is about a personal interaction with something or experience I've had. And I always grapple a little bit sometimes when I take a theme from somewhere or an idea that's been influenced by something else, because I kind of go, well, am I taking a bit of that IP to use to tell a story about what I want to tell about? So this is going to be an interesting conversation because I want to see what comes out of that.
I think that's the interesting thing about creativity in general, is that it doesn't really ever develop in a vacuum. It always develops in reaction to something, or in engagement with something, and sometimes it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of that, and it's filtered through each of us as artists to a point where it emerges ideally as something new, some new creative process. But the continuum of that, about something that's a straight copy at one end and something that's completely original at the other end, and there's a whole kind of spectrum of engagement in between there, that I think is where the kind of grey area of IP lies. And I think that there's, it's hard to know at what point you're borrowing or paying homage or and reinterpreting, and at what part you're infringing. So for each of you, in terms of that, how do you unpack when you've been finding your artistic voice? Obviously, that's emerging from work of other people whose work you admire, or things that you've reacted to. I imagine when you were starting out, that process was potentially quite different to how it is now. But for you, in terms of looking for inspiration from other work, are you still doing that, or are you finding that more internally? And if we start with Zoe.
I was definitely doing that up until a few years ago, and I think the Bowie mural is the epitome of me, like, compacting all my inspiration that I've been seeking outside of myself into one big piece of work. But now I'm looking inside myself. I'm really trying to research my whakapapa, I'm taking massive inspiration from the puraku, the stories of my tupuna, and trying to paint them in the most original way I possibly can. I'm still extremely inspired by artists who have been a shining light for me all my life, like Robin Kahukiwa, Peter Gossage, and David Bowie still, got love my glitter still. But now I'm just like, I'm closing off to the outside world and looking like inside myself, because that's where the most original shit is. No one's got the same brain as you do, so what better place to look? But with the Bowie mural, like that picture itself is completely original. It's a made up image. You won't be able to find the same picture, but I've got questions. I'm wondering, is it okay that I painted David Bowie? Like, it's a homage, but is that okay? Like, where does IP and copyright happen with homage or tribute murals? That's what I want to know. It's a question I've got to ask. I don't know. That's me anyway for that one.
Spell. Any thoughts on where that sits for your process?
Will you ask the question again?
Thinking about where you draw inspiration from, earlier on in your career, was that kind of directly through the process of copying, or was it more intuitive? And how do you find creative inspiration in other people's work now?
Yeah, cool. Okay, so in the hip hop world, we have our own set of rules and laws, and within our community, within our culture, we kind of police ourselves. So when you're starting out, it's kind of expected that you copy a lot. In fact, it's encouraged. Copy as much as you can, get it out of the way, because once you build a nice foundation of copying, it turns into your own thing, and you grow into your own style, and then from there, that's where you can really kind of start, right? But within our community, we police ourselves. If you're caught copying, you'll be pointed out quickly, and then it will be taken care of. So you have to go through those toy stages, those beginning amateur stages, and then you go into your own thing, right? That's what am I trying to say here? Inspiration will come regardless, and I think it's just whether you take that inspiration 100% and then it comes out as identical. That's bad, right? But I think once you have the tools and the foundation to kind of filter that inspiration, it'll come out as completely a new piece of art will come through that, right? Yeah.
I'd
Naturally.
just like to say you totally nailed that. That was an excellent answer. So good.
Thanks.
Shane, same kind of question.
I think, like myself, I'm a product of everything that I grew up listening to, looking at, being involved with. Everything that I do is an experience or something that's had an influence on me, and it might be like I read a lot of Asterix and Obelix and Tintin when I was a kid, because I only started reading proper books in my 30s. I really avoid, it was all the visual stuff, so I couldn't help when I started as an artist having all these things in my head that were personal to me, even though they might have been something that everyone else has experienced in their life, being part of that. So I really like, the thought of it in a similar kind of vein is all these kind of things, ideas that have been stewing up here have all come out, my take on these things. And as I've developed over the last, since the last 10 years, I've kind of created a style and something that I feel is a lot more unique to myself. Whereas at first it's kind of finding a way and developing that style and taking these things and putting them out there that could possibly have been influenced from somewhere. But see, I love music as well. So music influences a piece of art for me. Like there might be a Finn song that is actually, if I look at that piece of art, that's what it's about, So I don't know. I mean, all my work I think is authentic to me because it's an experience and it's coming from an emotion that I've had. But it might be reference to an object or Tintin or something. So it's kind of it's still something I grapple with a lot because I'll just keep seeing things or feeling things, and they will just become part of the narrative of who I am and what I want to explore.
Definitely. Kate, anything to add?
Yeah, from the art side, I've got two sort of drivers in terms of my art. One, I think Shane and Jeremy, you can probably relate to quite well, is that trying to convert sort of a song or the lyrics to a song to a visual representation. That's something that I enjoy doing, and there you do get elements sneaking through. There's no copies or anything like that, but you might have something like when I do a Pink Floyd, you might sort of see something that's reminiscent from a Pink Floyd show or something like that. Some of the imagery they might have that. And the other, which is more dominant part of my art, it's usually it's something bugs me, and I just have to sort of flop it out onto a canvas, and then it doesn't bug me anymore. And that sort of conceptual art, there's very little in terms of what you could say that you could sort of track back any sort of influences in it. But I do, when I'm trying to work out compositions in that, I do search online just to get, say, a picture of whatever something is, just so I get the positioning or the shape or the shadows or something, just to help me in terms of the composition. But yeah, in terms of actual copying, I think there's actually very little, apart from what I said at the intro when I was just looking back at some of the stuff I did. Like behind me, I've got a piece of art, and it's got a rampant tuatara that's Godzilla-like, sort of chewing into a buzzy bee. Now, it sounds pretty gruesome, but you know, it does have elements that comes from our culture, but it's not a direct copy, but it is influenced.
And that distinction between influence and reference and quotation, because there's also a difference between like quotation and copying, because quotation is usually acknowledged, so it's not about trying to portray someone else's work as your own, but it's saying this thing I recognize in the work that I admire as being a really interesting statement, and I want to add my voice to that discussion about that. And again, I guess that is another thing that blurs that line between what is and what isn't. So, when thinking about your own work, what are some of the ways that you protect your IP when you're creating a piece? How do you ensure that you, to use one of Spell's metaphors, how do you ensure that you have that recipe in a safe place before kind of sharing the cake with the world? I'll start with you, Spell, since I've co-opted your metaphor.
Can I use that?
Yeah, of course. How do you keep the recipe safe so it doesn't get stolen? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Is it like, in terms of like, I mean, in New Zealand, as far as I'm aware, as soon as anything's recorded or captured in some kind of medium, it is protected by copyright. But there's always that question around who has it first, who did it first, and is it? I know back in the day I would like post copies of things to myself so that it was postmarked, and which seems kind of ridiculous, but like it was a way of having a thing that had a date on it. It was like, I did this then. Is there anything like that you're kind of working through?
I think so. I can only speak on hip hop, right? That's what I'm in. That's what I'm an expert at. So with the hip hop thing, it's because of where hip hop music, rap music comes from, which is sampling. It's taking other people's art, and making a collage out of different elements from different sources. It's that's the foundation of our culture. Mm-hmm. So even though the music is 40 years on, and we've been through a whole bunch of big court cases, of sampling court cases, somewhere in the 2000s it became dangerous to sample, and producers had to start learning how to play the keys and not sample anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a big chunk of that essence that is still quite alive, in the music, and I'm one of those people that keeps that alive, and in knowing that my music is taken from different sources. To me, I don't mind if people take my music gets stolen all the time. My art gets taken and reposted all the time. Once the internet has it, it belongs to the internet. I have no control over what happens with it, and I'm okay with that because I'm a part of that that circle of life.
So being part of that kind of ongoing culture that borrows and readapts and recontributes.
Yes, that is our art form. That is literally what our art form is. Yeah.
And do you find that it's interesting how when sampling, when hip hop first started, and you get those early records, when they were first recorded, they weren't actually samples, were they? They were replayed by bands,
and that's because samplers didn't exist.
Yeah,
but it was an early form of sampling. It was take a famous song by Chic and then,
Good Times,
and get our band to just replay it, and we'll kind of do our own thing on it, and then extend it, and then make a song out of it. Sugar Hill Gang, that's where it all kind of.
Because there's a really interesting story in that song in terms of copyright as well, where they created that song. It was the hit the year before the Chic tune, but the lyrics were also stolen or borrowed, or
okay. So that's where it's bad, and that's where people outside of our culture and our community. Us in our community, we police ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when someone from the outside, which is what happened with the Sugar Hill Gang thing, when people from the outside come in, it's like, man, that's whack. That is stealing IP, right? And that's what was happening. Yeah.
Because he was never really properly credited for that, was he?
Nah.
Yeah.
Nah.
Rubbish.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the. I don't know. The whole conversation of IP and IP law and that is quite it's quite a white a concept. Yeah. At least from our perspective here in the hip hop world. Yeah.
Because there's been a lot as well where the use of samples can be so impressively flipped that they become an entirely new like there are certainly examples where someone's taken like a whole 16 bar chunk and put a big beat over it and sung over the top of it, and that is kind of at one end, but then there's stuff where it's like intricately chopped and new elements are built out, and it's the sampling law can have a negative impact on the creation of those new works.
Yeah, I think something to note here is that whether it's sampling in the music domain or whether it is in the visual domain, you're doing collages, and spell, I use that term in terms of the music side of things as well. If you do something which is considered transformative, so it's not just taking one thing and just putting it in a slightly different media, but it's transformative, then you're actually getting around the copyright issues. So, and that's something significant. So if you can see where it came from, but you've changed it enough that it's such a different and creative piece of art, even though you can see their origins. That is a way of avoiding copyright infringement and a way of avoiding getting into trouble.
And who becomes the judge of that?
That's the problem, and this is why I hate copyright and I love patents, because it's very subjective, and you take into account and again, going back to what Spell was saying about community, you go back to what the art community accepts as part of it. You've got the legal side and you've got the ethical side, and you look at things as somebody making money out of it and doing that unfairly. You look at the degree of transformation. You look at what essence was taken and whether that's unfair or not. Like one of my favourite cases is Queen and Bowie. There you go, Zoe. When Vanilla Ice years ago did Ice Ice Baby, the starting line of that song, and I'm a Queen fan, sound of Ice Ice Baby was exactly the same, and it was only one bar from Under Pressure by Queen and Bowie, even though it was a very tiny part. What was that?
It was, yes.
It was identical. So you sort of think, okay, it's Under Pressure, and then it was, and then it turned into Ice Ice Baby. So Queen and Bowie managed to successfully sue Vanilla Ice because he took the most distinctive part of that whole song without transforming it and put it at the start of his song, even though he had other stuff around it. So to go back to the issue, it is very subjective. That said, and I hope, Jeremy, you'll put up the link to that resource I sent to you. There are some really good guidelines as to how you can judge things in advance. It's not perfect, though.
Great. I will put that link up. So in terms of the question around other methods for kind of protecting your IP, does anyone else have any other things that you've done in that area, or is it just sort of you create the work and hope for the best and deal with the issues when they arise?
I actually can't really remember the question now that we've heard the kōrero.
That's all good.
I can jump in a little bit. I'm feeling like a bit of a fraud now because it's like a plumber with a leaky tap. So I advise my clients not so much around the outside, but around software and drawings, engineering drawings and so on. So I advise them to make certain that they have a very clear record, got the copyright symbol, got the date, got their name on it, and so on. My paintings, I don't do that. I just sign them off, which isn't very good. But I do take photos of them, and I've got a digital record of when the photo's taken. The other thing that we can do is that if you've been commissioned to do an artwork is to make certain that you actually have a proper contract in place. I know this is the legal side of things, but if you've been asked to create something, you need to be really clear who owns the IP from it, because if you're being paid for it, often the person paying you will own all of their rights, apart from the moral right of being asserted as the author. So they could possibly do whatever they like with it, depending on the nature of the contract. And the only thing that you can insist on is being shown to be the author. So if somebody else is asking you to do something, you really do need to have it really clear in writing what the story is, and it needs to be clear. And the best way to sort of judge that, and I would get an expert, a law expert in it, but the best way to judge it is what would upset you. What would you hate for them to do with your artwork? If they put it on a toilet seat, would that upset you? That sort of thing. So think about what you would like them to do or not do if they're going to pay you for it. And if they're going to take all of the rights in relation to it, make certain they pay you a heap. And so you can sort of say, no, that's it, and walk away and create something different.
Yeah, I think something I've learned since December with, especially talking to Tom, is that a contract, it doesn't even need to be like a really hardcore written one, but just like a very clear agreement between who is commissioning you to paint their wall or whatever it is that you're painting, between you and them. Because if they commission you to paint their wall and it's a public wall that everyone can see, if you haven't clarified it, then they own the copyright of the wall art. But you still own the moral right. The artist always owns the moral right of the work unless they've waived it. So you just need to be really clear with the person that you're doing a job for. If you want to be the copyright holder, you've just got to make sure that's super clear between you both, and whichever way works for you all. But yeah, if you don't have that, then one day they could turn around and be like, well, it's our wall and we paid you to do it, or even we paid for your materials. That's still a payment. We own your copyright for this wall and we'll do what we want to do, but it's still not cool. Like, they'd be rude to do that without your permission. But yeah, a contract's actually really good, or just like a very clear agreement. Who is the copyright owner of this artwork? But the artist will always have the moral rights to the work. Should always be acknowledged as the author. unless it's waived.
Another thing to note is that if somebody takes your work and does a derogatory version of it, you've got right to take action against them for that.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing is that if somebody does a parody, often they can get away with copying you if it's funny enough. Which and how do you judge that?
Yeah, because
Depends how
parody
funny
and
it is.
satire goes through fine, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Interesting. A few comments from people in the chat. Good kōrero. At some point, you start to think about your own expression, how to develop that. Great discussion for an important topic in today's art world, and there's definitely a difference between copying to learn and passing something off as your own. Then we have a question that says, how have you as artists confronted stolen IP or situations of knowing your work has ended up in places where you didn't authorize it?
I'll go.
Yep.
I'll go. So after I, had a rant about it, and then a whole bunch of people, well, especially Tom, the lawyer from Bad Exposure, he just said, send them a cease and desist letter immediately, and send them an invoice. Be like, you really pissed me off, or you've mucked me around, you've hurt me, and I want compensation for that. So send them an invoice. That'll get them to stop. But also, at the end of the day, if they're not listening to you, if they're ignoring you, call them out on social media, because that's, social media is a blessing and a curse, especially when it comes to artists and anyone's accessible to your work. But in this case, if someone's ripping you off blatantly and making money off your work without your permission, you can call them out if they're not going to comply with your, you're going out of your way, you're putting hours sometimes and money into contacting these people, because some of them are overseas, and and most of the time you're ignored. You're like, please stop selling my work. Please stop putting it on shitty t-shirts and stuff that I don't want any part in this. I don't back up your cause at all. Like, it's so insulting when someone just assumes they can use your imagery to promote their whatever they're into, and you might be completely against it, So it's like, send them an invoice, I say.
Particularly when it's used for advertising or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Shane, did you have any other things to add in that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because I find you got to it's hard, because I feel like I've got to take the good with the bad sometimes. Like, we put ourselves out there these days. Everything's out in the world, and this is going to happen, And I think the stuff that I'm quite prepared to take on is things that happen blatantly at home, because it's easier for me to do that. Like, I've had instances where, things have happened overseas, and I've tried to track the company down, and they'll be registered in the States, but I know that they're not in the States, they're somewhere in China. And so the exposing it on social media is a good one for that. I did a thing on Fair Go about that, and it was more about letting people know that by my product that I've had nothing to do with that. So us as artists, like you were saying, it's important that because these things are so hard to stop, So if someone's producing some crappy merchandise, then for me it's important to know the people that buy my art, that has nothing to do with me, and that's my main aim there. But if it's something at home and I feel that there's something unjust, particularly if it's a big company that's using it for commercial gain, then I'll step in there and make sure I go through the legal channels to try and sort it out.
Awesome.
Because they wouldn't like me taking their brand and using it, So it's the same thing.
Definitely.
I've got a few comments there. One is that many artists don't realise how precious they are in terms of valuable they are, and reputational damage by somebody using your art on a product or advertising or whatever that you do not support can be quite significant. I think there's two things there. Is that one is you've got to work out yourself personally how much this is upsetting you, whether it's financially or morally or ethically, because if you are upset by it, in any of those areas, what you need to do is actually hit really hard. I would do what Zoe did and actually get an expert, not because I'm pushing the legal fraternity, but if you're going to take action, you need to hit really hard. You need to show them that they are going to be damaged either because their reputation is going to be down the tubes because you're going to go the social media way. And I'm actually for saying what the damage is. Could be to them, and so it is a bit of blackmail in a way. But I think they've got to realise consequences. There are a lot of ways to word the initial letter to them, that the cease and desist letter, in such a way that they will find it much easier to roll over than it would be to fight it. Personally, I don't think many artists should be fighting things unless they've got a really big back balance. But the first hit can be actually quite hard. And if you get the wording right, rather than doing it yourself and going through a lawyer, that could be enough to stop the other side. If they don't stop, then you need to look at your position again and see how far you meant to fight it. Some battles are best left to leave, but for me, is if it's hurting you either in any form, whether it's pocket, whether it's emotionally, whether it's morally, you need to make certain that you do yourself justice. Or you let it go.
I think one of the hard things with taking on that challenge with a legal perspective is in my circumstance, I went for a year. They weren't prepared. They wanted me to go away. They thought I'd give up. And so when you're tens of thousands of dollars invested in it, I wasn't going to walk away because that was my reputation. But it's like us artists are emotional and we're very sensitive. And I tell you what, my mental health and through that period, if I didn't have the support of my partner, thinking I might have to sell my house because I wanted to teach them a lesson, more or less, and assert my rights. I mean, if the other party wants to carry on and just say deny, and they've got the funds to do it, then I think it's a real, I wasn't as prepared as I didn't think it would be as hard as it became. I'd do it again, no doubts about that. But now I know how the law works, that I would be a lot more ready to do everything that was required to try and squish the time up and get it sorted. So, it's important, but I know that a lot of other artists, they just couldn't do that fight. They just couldn't do it. And so the social media path is actually a really good one when they need something sorted as well. But I'm a little bit hesitant sometimes with that because I know some of the ramifications if you do that. Yep. So, it can be quite bad.
A couple more comments we've got from people viewing. There's one saying that there are examples of stealing turning out well. For example, a South Auckland beat maker who went viral through TikTok, and Jason Derulo took the beat, and that hits the charts, and then the young fella gets signed because it gets signed, although it was thought Derulo stole it originally. So there's some kind of benefits in terms of reputation and kind of sharing your work, I guess, if it does get stolen. I think that's happened in a number of occasions. We also have a question here that's saying, if I was to commission a piece of work and the best way forward is to have a clear contract, what are some of the key things to kind of have in that agreement to protect, I guess, the commissioner and the artist, to make sure that there's some clarity there? Sorry.
We've actually got a checklist on our website. So we've got a website called badexposure.co.nz, and it is a learning resource for artists and anyone interested in copyright laws around art, especially public art. Badexposure.co.nz, and there is a checklist on there for what you should include in your contract. It's on the copyright page, and then there's a copy wrong page for things you can do about, if you get ripped off and shit. But there's a checklist on there. It's helpful. I want everyone to access and use it as they please. So check that out.
I've just checked it out. It's actually a very good checklist. So
okay, cool.
Awesome. Oh,
Yeah, Tom wrote it, not me. I'm like, yes, Tom, nice. I'll just chuck that in there.
great. We're coming towards the end of our time here, and this has been a really fascinating discussion. So thank you all for that. I want to end with a question, unless if we have any others that come through in the comments. But one question I have is: do you think that there should be a limit to what can be copyrighted, or how long that copyright should last? And I mean, it's a very open question, and it's one that will have probably a range of answers.
Yeah, I think it'd be different for everyone. Like with Spell and his music, it's it sounds like a completely different set of rules, really. So I would say yes, there's definitely. I just would love everyone to contact me first if they want to use my work on anything. But then with Spell stuff, it's like kind of, would you consider that a compliment? I guess of because it is the culture of hip hop to copy and paste or make it cooler. Continue that. I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I guess the whole hip hop culture was birthed out of rebellion. It was quite a, it went the punk rock scene and the hip hop kids were kind of they were all about the same thing, and that was like anti-establishment. We're gonna steal from you, and we're gonna flip it and turn it into our own thing, and we're over here, and this is our cool little thing, and you aren't a part of it. So once that kind of went mainstream, once the white man saw that there was dollars in it, it was like, oh, we're gonna take it, and then we're gonna put it in, we're gonna make some money off of it. Kind of the rules started getting a bit blurry, Yeah. But
I love that though. I love the rebellion of it. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, that is still the essence of what hip hop culture is. Yeah. So the copyright laws, and like we're still gonna keep sampling, and we're still gonna keep taking IP from different sources, and we're gonna keep remixing it and putting it out to the world. And
as a listener of hip hop, I have never thought of it as copying, and I've always thought of it as a homage to the previous person who made that music, and it's like a respect thing,
Yeah, it is. That's exactly what it is. That's how we see it. But when we talk about IP, which is that's a foreign word to me. It's in the eyes of the law, it's stealing. Yeah. But we don't care about that shit. So it's like, that's not it. We have nothing. Yeah.
That the difference between flat out just taking a thing and putting it here and being like, this is mine, and recontextualize it by having that deep knowledge of the thing that you're sampling, finding the bits that make sense, and then chopping them and reworking them to present. You almost kind of, it could be seen as the same way as a sculptor getting a block of marble and chipping away at it to find the kind of art, to make the artwork within. You're kind of doing that same thing where you've got this existing thing, and then you're chipping away at it and recontextualizing it to make something new, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to come in from both the art side and the legal side, because that's why I'm here. I don't think there should be a limit to what can be copyrighted. I think if we create something new, I think that should be recognised as being special, and you should be able to have, the right to have it in that form. So I don't think there should be a limit. I think that anything created should be recognised as being special and shouldn't be able to be just immediately appropriated by somebody else. And there are from the legal side of things, there's ways you can do it. You can contact the people who you might be, if you are borrowing or inspired, which in quotes, from someone, then you can actually seek permissions and so on to be able to use it. And it can be showcased as an homage, but in a way that you're not going to get into trouble for doing it. In terms of length of time, it's actually really quite clear in the law how long copyright work lasts for, and it's scarily long for the arts. So if you're dealing with normal or with the usual sort of non-artistic IP, copyright in something that you might sort of make, like, I don't know, toilet brush or something like that, is only 16 years, but for a piece of art it's 50 years after the death of the author. If it's a piece of film, 50 years after when it's first produced. In the US, they can renew copyrights and things as well. So I think the length of time of a copyright work is quite long, and I think it's actually justified, because I think creativity needs to be recognised.
Because the length of time that can be renewed in the States, I guess the other question with regards to that is in terms of work in the public domain. And so with modern work being renewed so often, is there an issue, do you feel, with work being denied from the public domain in terms of its ability to be reworked, or is that less of an issue?
I think it's less of an issue. You can't renew in New Zealand, so that's something to take note of. United States is a little bit tricky. I need to just mention a few other things. There are other laws other than copyright we need to take note of. There is privacy and celebrity. So if we take a celebrity's image, and do something with that, they can be personality rights, which are different around the world. There are trademark rights, even if you do a parody, like there's a case around Starbucks, and somebody did a parody of the mermaid and made her look a little bit more saucy than she really is, whether you're actually causing reputational damage to a trademark. There are other things in copyright that we need to be aware of as well as artists. If we're taking inspiration from something, are we damaging somebody's rights? Even the heirs to somebody's, like Prince, if you look at Prince, for example, his heirs to his estate could be upset if you take something of Prince's image or something and reproduce it in a way that they're not happy about. So there are more sort of pitfalls around there. And I suppose to summarise, it's just more to look at, if you are borrowing from somewhere or inspired from somewhere, just see if you can check out whether you're going to be treading on somebody's toes. And it can be a little bit tricky, but what I'd hate to do is see somebody, an artist, spend a lot of time and effort and creativity producing something and having that work shut down because they haven't gone through and just made certain they can do what they want to do.
You mentioned the images of celebrity. Is there similar law in place for images of people who are non-celebrities whose photo may be used in artworks? Do they have protection?
Yes, and it is actually quite tricky, the law around that. So, and it is different per country. So there are privacy laws. Even paparazzi, you know how paparazzi do the Zoom photos and things like that. That can be illegal to actually do something which is out of the normal sort of context or something, or if you use a microphone to listen at a far distance to somebody's conversation, and you take, you might sample that and put that into something. So yes, so for example, with our cafe, I'm building up our website and I'm going to put a whole lot of new images on it, and the best images are ones with people in it. I actually need to get the permission of the people I'm taking photos of to be able to put them on my website, to be totally clear. So yes, if you're taking image of anyone, whether it's celebrity or not, the safest thing is just to get the permission so you can go ahead and work uncluttered without anything getting in your way.
So really, it's about acknowledgement and having those discussions with people as your kind of safest point. I think that kind of links back to what Zoe was saying about just being asked for use. Makes a difference. Shane, did you have anything to add in that context?
No, I kind of have a perspective on. I like heaps of people have been influenced by my work, and as I've been influenced by other things, before that. For me, I find it quite nice sometimes to see that if I can see that there's been some inspiration from what I've done. What I find when I need to step in is when they've blatantly taken something and used it and called it their own. That's kind of different to me, and that's where I think that's for me is the important thing, that I think that where the IP for me is the thing that needs to stand. When there's been something that's a little bit more ambiguous, the shapes, the lines, or the imagery, then I can let that go. But when it's a blatant IP theft, then that's when without acknowledgement or asking or anything like that, that's when I kind of get a bit upset.
Yeah.
But I think it's hard, for like with art too, is that we've all been influenced by things. We could search out, even though we might think our work's original. Like I try not. When I first started being an artist, I didn't even know any other artists. I kind of avoid looking at other work because I don't want to be influenced by it. I just want to do what I want to do and get that out and try and keep it as pure to whatever my signature look is. But I can go hunt, I can go looking, and I'll find work that someone could say, oh, he's been influenced by that or whatever. So I think there's just so much stuff in the world that it's pretty hard to feel totally unique anyway. That's how I feel anyway.
And I think that idea is a really a great way to kind of wrap it up. So I'm just going to quickly go around and see if there's any kind of final thoughts that anyone has, any recommendations or things for people to ponder, or just kind of views on this topic in general. And so we'll start with Kate.
I think just to be aware of two things is that what we do as artists is valuable. Excuse me, from a personal or financial or moral perspective, and we need to decide within ourselves how hard you fight. Shane, I actually feel for you. A year is that's tough and wrong. And the other side of it is that as artists we need to respect others' rights as well. And the smartest thing to do, and I have to admit I don't follow it myself, and I should, is to, before you create a work, while you're researching the work, is just to make certain that you're free to do it.
Cool. Zoe.
No, I don't think I've got any more to add to that. I think we've covered all the things that I'd give as advice, and anything else is on the website that I can't remember. www.badexposure.co.nz for the basics in a nutshell. Really, yeah.
Awesome. Spell.
Me? No, nothing to add from my side. Thanks for having me.
Cool. And Shane?
Just stay passionate and stay creative, and I've really loved listening to you guys talk. It's been inspiring. So
awesome.
Well,
well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to our panelists, Kate, Zoe, Spell, and Shane. It's been a real pleasure to spend this time with you, having this discussion. I think that there's so many kind of things to consider and so many things to think about as we make art and as we work with other artists and as we work with non-artists and share our work, and how that kind of engages with the communities around us and what that means for ourselves and our culture, and it's really fascinating to have this discussion. So thank you all, and thank you all for watching at home or wherever you are, and have an excellent rest of your Monday night. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah.